It was February, and in Athens, Georgia, that meant rain, the kind that didn't so much fall as cling to the air. My apartment smelled like old coffee and damp paper. The heater rattled when it kicked on. I'd just ended a relationship that never quite felt real, not in the way it should have. It was the kind of relationship that made you feel lonelier in company than you ever did alone. His name doesn't matter. He took pieces of me, my voice, my rhythm, my certainty, and left behind nothing but questions. It had been 3 months since he left, or rather since I told him to go and then spent weeks wondering if I'd made a mistake. But by February, I'd stopped waiting for his name to pop up on my screen. Mostly. That's where I was, midway between numb and functioning, when I decided I needed a new bookshelf. My old one leaned like it was exhausted. I'd bought it during undergrad when I thought particle board could hold weight, and like a lot of my early 20s choices, it had proven unreliable. I found the Craigslist post on a Tuesday morning, scrolling while waiting for my tea to steep. The listing was short, practical. Solid oak shelf, gently used, smells like polish, $25. Can deliver locally. It felt like something small I could control, something solid. So I messaged the seller. His name was Drew. We agreed to meet that Saturday afternoon, 2:15, at a coffee shop off Prince Avenue, 974 Prince, across from the old church that always had cryptic messages on its marquee. I picked the spot because it was public, and I still had enough self-preservation to not invite strangers to my door. He was there when I arrived, early, like me. He wore a denim jacket with frayed cuffs and had parked a beat-up Volvo in the side lot. The bookshelf was in the trunk, as promised. "Didn't think it'd be this small," I said, eyeing it. He smiled. "Didn't think you'd be this pretty," he said, and it wasn't the words that got me. It was the tone. Casual, like he was stating a fact. I laughed, not out of obligation, not out of discomfort, just because it felt strange and good to be noticed. It had been a while. We sat outside, coffees in hand, and talked. Really talked. About the way grocery stores felt weirdly aggressive on Sunday mornings, about obscure bands from the late 90s, about bad professors and the worst kind of roommates. Drew asked questions, the kind that came with follow-ups, like he actually listened. I told him I was a literature grad student, that I lived nearby, that I was trying to pare down what didn't matter and rebuild what did. He told me he was an artist, like not being pinned down. Mostly freelance stuff, he said with a shrug. Design, odd jobs. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him. Callie, my roommate, wasn't thrilled. When I told her about the coffee, she gave me a look, the kind only best friends can pull off without speaking. "You met a guy off Craigslist, Naomi. We sat in public, it was fine." She rolled her eyes. That's how true crime episodes start. But I wasn't worried, not then. Over the next week, Drew and I messaged a lot. Not flirty, not overtly, just thoughtful. A photo of a used bookstore, a playlist, a video of rain hitting a tin roof. It felt like connection. Not love. Not yet. But something like warmth. And after so many months of being talked down to, of being made to feel like I was too much and never enough, I welcomed it. I kept thinking of what he'd said that first day, leaning back in his chair, sipping his black coffee with both hands. "You seemed real," he'd said. "Most people don't." And I believed him. By the second week, we were texting every day. Morning check-ins, late-night thoughts. There was a rhythm to it. He'd send a picture of his coffee mug. I'd send one back of the scribbled notes from whatever seminar had just drained me. I told myself it was harmless, that it was just nice to feel like someone was thinking about me, that maybe I was finally getting my balance back. He sent a playlist with a handwritten title in the photo, "For the Rainy Days." It had soft, moody indie tracks, a few older jazz instrumentals, one spoken word piece I didn't recognize. I listened to it while I wrote, while I cooked, while I lay awake wondering if I was opening up too fast, or not fast enough. We met again the following Sunday, same place, different vibe. He brought a book of short stories he thought I'd like, and I did. Barry Hannah, sharp and strange. We shared a croissant, and he told me he'd been sketching again. "You're kind of my muse right now," he said, not joking but not fully serious either. "Don't say that," I laughed. "Why not? It's too much." He grinned. "You don't like being seen?" I shrugged, not sure I trust it. That made him go quiet, but not in a tense way, like he understood. We sat like that, quiet, sipping coffee while the sky turned from gray to orange. Callie wasn't around that weekend, and when Drew offered to walk me home, I let him. It was a short walk, maybe 5 blocks, but it felt like an old movie moment. Cold air, crunch of leaves, his denim jacket brushing against mine. When we got to the front steps, I said thank you, and he didn't push to come in. He didn't even ask. He just smiled and said, "Talk soon?" "Yeah," I said, "soon." Later that night, Callie texted from her sister's place. "You good? Still breathing?" "Barely. Had too much coffee. Also maybe feelings." "Jesus, be careful, Naomi." "I am. I promise." But I wasn't sure I knew what careful meant anymore. Not when every time his name popped up on my phone, I felt like something in me clicked on. It was 4 days later, a Thursday, when it shifted. I'd been at the library late working on a paper that refused to cooperate. I didn't tell anyone I was there. I wasn't meeting Drew. I hadn't texted him since that morning. At 11:42 p.m., I got a message. "You walk home every Thursday around this time?" I stopped walking. My apartment was 3 blocks away, the streets mostly empty, damp sidewalk, dim streetlights. I looked around. Nothing. "How do you know that?" The dots blinked. Then, I was passing by. "Thought I saw you." "That's kind of weird, Drew. Just means I care." I didn't reply. I just walked faster. Keys between my fingers like a blade, just like Callie taught me. When I got home, I locked every door and turned on every light. He didn't text again that night. I stared at the ceiling, playlist still playing softly through my laptop, the same tracks that once felt comforting now turning sour. I didn't tell Callie. I told myself maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe he just happened to be nearby. Maybe I was overreacting. But I didn't sleep. The next morning I saw the unread message icon and felt sick. Not from what it might say, but from the hope I still had that it might be normal. That maybe he'd apologize or explain. That this was all just some awkward misread, but there was no message. I didn't text him. I wanted to. I even typed out a dozen versions of, "Hey, can we talk?" and "What was that last night?" before deleting each one. I stared at the blank thread for 10 minutes, then tossed my phone under the pillow like that would somehow kill the urge. Callie noticed something was off right away. She came home from class and found me making pancakes I wasn't eating. "You only cook when you're spiraling," she said. "Pancakes aren't spiraling. You hate pancakes." I sighed. Something happened. Her arms crossed. "What kind of something?" I told her. "Not everything, not the whole thread, but the basics, the late-night text, the weirdness, the sudden chill in my gut that hadn't gone away since." "Naomi, block him." "I don't want to be dramatic." "It's not dramatic. It's a boundary." I nodded, but didn't do it. Not yet. Not because I still liked him, though maybe I did, but because I couldn't reconcile the guy who listened to my poetry recs with someone who might be watching me walk home without saying hello. That night, I cracked. Not in a big way, just a little. I liked the version of you I met over coffee. The one who said I seemed real. That felt good. Sent, delivered, read. Then nothing. The next day, the number was deactivated. It was like someone yanked a cord out of a wall. Like none of it ever happened. I even went back to the Craigslist post just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. It was gone too. No listing, no seller profile, no trace. Callie thought I should report it, but what would I say? I gave my number to a guy who seemed kind and now he's gone? They wouldn't do anything. Maybe there was nothing to do. I kept the bookshelf. It's real. Oak, sturdy, still smells faintly of polish. It holds my poetry books now. Sometimes I sit in bed with the window cracked and let that playlist play, and I think about how it felt to be seen, and how quickly that feeling curdled into something else, into something that makes you double-check your locks, that turns glances over your shoulder into habits. I never heard from Drew again. I never saw him on the street. Never ran into him at that coffee shop. It was like he'd stepped out of one life into another, taking the version of himself I trusted with him. But every now and then, when my phone buzzes and it's a number I don't know, I hesitate, just long enough to wonder. Weeks went by. Midterms came and went. I buried myself in seminar papers, readings, late-night editing sessions. But the silence Drew left behind clung like smoke. I tried to let it settle. I even convinced myself I was over it. But sometimes, on cold nights, I'd catch myself glancing out the window for no reason, checking shadows. Callie started asking fewer questions, which somehow made it worse. It meant she assumed I was okay, or had decided I wouldn't talk about it anymore. One night, she brought it up again, gently. We were in the kitchen, sharing wine from a chipped mug. "I never saw you like that before," she said, not accusing, not angry, disappeared. "You lit up, then you—" "I didn't disappear," I said, but my voice was too soft to believe. She set the mug down. "What did you like about him?" The question startled me. "I don't know. He was observant, curious. I didn't have to explain myself all the time. It felt like I could be someone again. Not the girl who got dragged through a shitty relationship, not the ghost of who I used to be." "That's not on him to fix," she said. "I know." But I hadn't known. Not really. I'd given Drew space inside my recovery that he didn't earn. I let his attention patch holes I should have stitched myself. One night, I ran into a guy I knew from the department, Ben. We'd had classes together, nothing flirty, just book talk and hallway nods. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. I said yes. I didn't tell him anything about Drew. I didn't need to. We talked about Faulkner and campus rumors and where to get the best fries after midnight. It was normal. It was easy. After he walked me home, I sat at the edge of my bed and stared at the bookshelf. It had been months since I dusted it. I ran a cloth over the surface and thought about how quickly we assign meaning to objects, as if wood and screws can hold memories, as if anything can be that permanent. I played the playlist one more time, just once. It didn't hurt. It just sounded like music again. It's been a year now. The bookshelf's still in my room. It's held up, still sturdy. I added a plant to it, a low-maintenance succulent Callie gave me after finals. It's thriving somehow, even when I forget to water it. Every so often, when I tell this story, usually after a few drinks or during those late-night roommate chats that go too long, I watch people's faces. The part that makes them tilt their head is never the Craigslist thing. It's the part where I say I didn't block him, that I texted him instead. "But why?" they ask. "Why give him that?" And I always tell them the truth, because I needed to say it out loud. I needed to reclaim the version of me that believed someone could see her and not use it against her. I wasn't texting him for closure. I was reminding myself of who I was when I gave him my number. I still get anxious sometimes, still hesitate when strangers ask too many questions, still walk fast after dark. But I also laugh easier now. I go out more. I say yes to things I used to turn down. Callie's still my roommate. Ben's still in my life. Nothing big happened between us, we're just friends. But he's a good one, and that's enough. And me, I'm still writing, still reading, still learning how to be seen without giving parts of myself away. The bookshelf reminds me of all of it. The danger in appearances, the way kindness can wear any face. The fact that sometimes people vanish not because they're mysterious, but because they were never really there in the first place. And if there's a lesson in all this, I think it's this. Being seen feels good, but being safe is better. You don't owe anyone your trust just because they offer attention. Real connection isn't about being noticed. It's about being respected. Especially when no one's watching. Especially then. When I left Portland, I told myself I was done with chaos. No more unpredictable partners. No more roller coaster jobs. No more nights sitting in the car wondering what version of someone would walk through the door next. I moved across the country with 3 duffel bags, my camera gear, and a cracked iPhone that still had voice memos from a version of me I didn't recognize anymore. Huntsville wasn't part of the plan. I was aiming for Atlanta. Nashville, maybe. But rent was cheaper here, and a real estate agent I shot for online said the market was heating up. Of work for someone like you, she'd promised over Zoom. That was 5 months ago. Plenty by January. The charm of starting over had started to wear thin. I'd shot some product photos for a local CBD company and a few cozy listings for a guy who sold starter homes on Instagram, but nothing consistent. Then my best client ghosted me after 2 rounds of edits. They stopped replying, probably hoping I'd just give up on the invoice. And I might have, if rent hadn't been due in 6 days. Selling the camera was a last resort. The Sony Alpha A7 III wasn't just my most valuable piece of gear. It was part of my identity. It made me look legit in a sea of influencers and TikTok hobbyists. But I couldn't afford pride. I needed rent. I listed it for $1,000. Body, 2 lenses, charger, all of it in a padded case. I added, firm price, no shipping, public meeting spot. Serious buyers only. Then I refreshed the listing every few hours like it was a lottery ticket. That's when Mac messaged me. He didn't haggle. Said he worked with a small video crew and needed a backup camera for a shoot the next weekend. He sounded brisk, like someone who didn't have time for small talk, and I liked that. His messages weren't warm, but they weren't weird either. Just transactional. He offered to meet that night, which made me pause. I replied, asking for a grocery store lot or somewhere well lit. Instead, he suggested Lot B at Hazeland Crossing, an old strip mall I only vaguely recognized. Said his cousin worked at a nearby shop and he couldn't drive far that evening. It should have been a no. The place wasn't dangerous exactly, but half the businesses were boarded up, and it sat at the edge of the city where things got quiet after dark. Too quiet. Still $1,000 cash in hand. In January, it was hard to say no. I texted Casey, my best friend back in Portland, right before leaving. Meeting Craigslist buyer at Hazeland Lot B Gray Fusion, 9 p.m. If I go quiet, call the cops, LOL. She texted back within seconds. OMG, Rach, don't die for rent money. That's an ugly headline. I told her I'd be quick, that I was fine, that I had pepper spray in my purse. All the lies we tell to make ourselves feel invincible. By 9:18 p.m., I was parked under a flickering streetlight in the mostly empty lot. The kind of light that buzzes and dims every few seconds, like it's deciding whether or not to keep you company. I saw the gray Ford Fusion 2 rows down, parked in reverse. Its engine was on. No movement. I sat in my car, letting the heater run. I texted, "Hey, I'm here. You want to check it out?" Nothing. A full minute passed before the passenger door creaked open, but no one stepped out. Just a figure shifting in the dark. No dome light. No greeting. Then came the message. "Can you bring the camera over? My leg's in a brace, hard to walk." My fingers hovered over the screen. Every part of me screamed, "No." But only for a second. Then I texted back, "Sure, I'll be right there." Except that wasn't what I did. Not even close. I didn't reach for the camera case. I reached for my phone and hit record. It was instinct more than strategy. I've filmed enough behind-the-scenes footage to know how to frame a shot, how to keep a hand steady even when your heart isn't. I panned the phone just slightly as I stepped out of the car, letting it capture the gray Fusion. Its lack of a license plate, the way its windows seemed darker than they should have been. The cold hit me right away, sharp and damp like the kind that crawls under your sleeves and settles in your bones. I zipped my jacket and locked the car behind me. Just 2 beeps. Not loud, but enough to announce myself. I took a few steps toward the car, slow and careful, watching the shadows inside. The passenger seat shifted slightly again, like someone adjusting, not injured, but impatient. That's when I saw it, a shape in the back seat ducking low, too big to be a bag. Someone was hiding. I stopped. I didn't say a word. I didn't run or scream. I just turned, calm as I could manage, and walked the other direction. Not back to my car, not to the dark end of the lot. I headed toward the side door of the gym, where I could see two guys in hoodies leaning against the wall, chatting. One had a towel slung over his shoulder. Their presence grounded me, gave me a target. "Hey," I called out, making my voice sound casual, like nothing was wrong. "Sec? My ride's acting weird. Can I wait here for They both looked up, puzzled. One of them nodded. "Sure, yeah." I stopped beside them, close enough to be seen, to be heard. I didn't even glance back at the Fusion until I heard the tires. Screeching. Aggressive. The car peeled out, engine roaring louder than necessary. Like whoever was inside didn't care about being subtle anymore. It tore out of the lot and vanished down the road, taillights bouncing as it hit the curb too fast. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. The gym guys asked what was going on. I explained it in pieces, too shaky to be coherent at first. Craigslist buyer, weird messages, someone hiding in the back. They listened, eyes wide, and one of them offered to stay with me until the cops came. Because I was calling the cops. That was non-negotiable now. The officer who showed up was a woman in her 40s with the kind of posture that made you feel both protected and slightly scolded. I showed her the messages, the video, even the Craigslist ad I'd posted. She nodded a lot, asked a few specific questions. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "We've had 3 similar reports since before the holidays. All women. Gear listed online, meeting places shifted at the last minute. 2 were robbed. 1 got pulled halfway into a van before she fought her way out." She looked at me with a strange mix of concern and weariness. "You trusted your gut. That saved you." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch in the dark, wrapped in a blanket, the camera case still zipped shut by the door. Every time a car drove past the apartment, I tensed. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach knotted. By morning, I was still wired and still broke. I didn't repost the listing. Instead, I called the CBD client who owed me money, left a voicemail that wasn't polite. Then I emailed every real estate agent I'd worked with in the last 6 months. Asked if they had work, even small stuff. I offered discounted sessions, referral deals, whatever it took. 3 replied by the afternoon. One of them had a lead for a local coffee brand doing a full rebrand. They needed consistent photos for their website, social ads. I pitched them hard, offered them the best rate I could while still surviving. They hired me by the end of the week. It didn't fix everything overnight. I still scrambled for gigs, still skipped dinners sometimes to stretch groceries. But I didn't touch the Sony. I didn't even move it from its case for weeks. When I finally did, it was for a sunrise shoot. Just a foggy January morning, golden light filtering through dead trees. Nothing dramatic, but it felt like mine again. That camera, the one I almost traded for a parking lot nightmare, it reminded me who I was. Not someone helpless, not someone reckless, just someone trying to survive. But surviving doesn't mean silencing your fear. It means listening to it before the silence becomes permanent. After everything, I still catch myself replaying that night. Not the part where I saw the figure in the back seat, not even the part where the car tore off. It's earlier than that. The quiet moment just after I pulled into the lot. That flickering streetlight, the cold pressing in through the car windows, the way my breath clouded the windshield. That was the moment I knew something was off. Before the texts, before the door opened, there was just this stillness. The kind you feel in your bones when your brain hasn't caught up yet. People talk about bad vibes like it's a joke, a meme. But that stillness, That was instinct. That was every part of me remembering things I'd tried to forget. Nights when I hadn't listened soon enough. People I'd made excuses for. Times I'd second-guessed myself because it was easier than making a scene. It's strange how fast your body remembers. After the police report, I let myself stop pretending I was okay. I told Casey the truth, that I wasn't just broke, I was lonely. Really profoundly alone in a new place where I didn't know who to call if things went sideways. She offered to fly out, even if just for a weekend. I said no, but it mattered that she asked. Instead, I started trying to rebuild here. Not just work, people, places I could feel safe in. I joined a co-working space downtown, even if it meant spending money I didn't really have. I started going to the same coffee shop on Wednesdays, always sitting at the corner table with the red stool. Sometimes people recognized me, sometimes they didn't. But I showed up. One of the guys from the gym that night, Jordan, found me on Instagram. Turns out he's a trainer, part-time videographer. We ended up working together on a promo shoot a few months later. Totally normal gig. Paid on time. Good vibes all around. He never brought up the night in the parking lot again, but I think we both remembered. The strangest part is how close I came to brushing it off. If I hadn't seen the shape in the back seat, if they'd waited 10 more seconds, I might have walked straight to that car. I think about that sometimes. How survival isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a step in the right direction. A half-second decision, a locked car door, a text to a friend. We want danger to be obvious, but most of the time it's disguised as something that makes sense. A polite buyer, a professional message, a minor inconvenience. It's easy to call people paranoid when you've never had to choose between paying rent and staying safe. That's a choice I never want to make again. Now, every time I shoot with that Sony, I think about how close I came to losing it. Not just the camera, but my safety, my space, maybe more. I still have the Craigslist messages. Still have the video, though I haven't watched it in a while. I keep it for the same reason people save news clippings or old scars. As proof that it happened, that I didn't imagine it. And when I walk into a dim parking lot now, I don't just glance around, I scan. I notice. I trust what I feel, even if I can't explain it. Because here's the truth I learned that night in Lot B. Safety isn't paranoia, it's preparation. It's permission to say no, even when you need the money, especially then. And if someone ever tries to make you feel small for being cautious, they were never someone safe to begin with. When I got the call that my car had been totaled in a hit and run, I was halfway through a clinical shift at the hospital. I remember gripping the steering wheel as the nurse handed me the phone, feeling my pulse race. The insurance company's words, "Not covered, deductible too high," echoed in my head. I'd just saved a $500, tight but enough for a reliable used car. Now it was gone. Driving in Loveland without wheels meant isolation. Clinical rotations would bleed into travel chaos. My mom already worked doubles, barely home enough to sit. I'd always been careful, shy, more likely to take the bus than drive at night. But finals loomed, rent was due, and time didn't stop. When I landed at home that afternoon, my mom was sleeping. She'd been up all night at the hospital. I slid the remaining cash envelope into my backpack. Use it for school, for work, I told myself. But as I stared at Craigslist later that night, desperation whispered louder. There it was. A dark gray 2009 Honda Civic with 120,000 miles, a $200 firm, clear title. It looked exactly like the photos. The post said, "My nephew's old car, barely used." I messaged the seller, Craig M. He replied in under an hour, polite and to the point. We arranged a meeting for the next evening, said I'd bring cash and someone with me. I told him my brother would come. I wasn't proud, but I couldn't go alone. That Monday afternoon, I finished my shift, tugged on scrubs, and rushed out the door. My mom was already gone. I lied in the text to Craig. I'd be there around 5:40. He confirmed. My stomach rolled with nerves and relief. This could be it. a way back to normal. I parked my bike, my old backup, on the sidewalk by the cabin-like house at the edge of town. The sun hung low, long shadows stretching. Deer tracks dotted the grass beyond the driveway, and the mailbox was broken, the yard overgrown. My pulse accelerated, but the Civic sat in plain view, sparkling in the light. I took a breath and stepped toward the door. By 5:40, I knocked gently on the screen. A middle-aged man in plaid answered, balding, quiet eyes. "You here for the Civic?" he asked. I nodded, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. "I'm Vanessa." He stood aside. "Go ahead." Inside, it smelled old, must and stale cigarettes. I stepped toward the car and reached for the driver's door. The interior matched the pictures. Air freshener hanging from the mirror, clean upholstery, old cassette tapes in the back seat. I ran my hand over the steering wheel, buttery soft. For a moment, it felt real. Then I noticed the disposable camera on the passenger seat, sealed in plastic with a sticky note. "Do not touch." My breath seized. Who leaves a camera in plain sight with that warning? I stepped out and cleared my throat. "So, it runs fine?" He nodded. "Took it for a spin earlier." I swallowed. "Do you have the title?" He motioned behind him. "It's inside. Come in." One step past the screen door, and I froze. On the kitchen table were printed photos, the title, registration, and pictures of the car, and one of me, taken outside Walgreens, then another of me holding groceries outside my house. Every instinct screamed. I faked calm. "I forgot my ID in the car," I said softly. "Let me grab it." He didn't say a thing as I backed up, heart racing. I stepped through the door, heard the latch click shut behind me. I didn't wait for him to object. I sprinted to my bike, threw my backpack on, and pedaled off. My teeth felt tight. My lungs burned on the cold air. I dared a glance back and saw him pick up the disposable camera from the seat. He stood in the doorway, face unreadable. I didn't look again until I was blocks away, when I finally allowed tears to pool behind my eyes. I didn't stop writing until my thighs burned. Somewhere near the Walgreens where I worked, I finally coasted to a shaky stop behind the building and collapsed onto a curb. I could still smell that house. Dust, cigarettes, something sharp and wrong. I wanted to call someone. My mom was still working, and my closest friend had moved away 2 months ago. So I sat there and tried to breathe. Then I did the only thing that made sense. I called 911. My voice cracked, but I made myself speak clearly. I told the dispatcher everything. How I'd found the ad, the photos on the table, the camera with the note. I didn't even know what crime I was reporting. I just knew it was off, and that sick twist in your gut when your body knows something before your brain accepts it. The dispatcher didn't brush me off. She asked questions, stayed calm, asked where I was, told me an officer would follow up that night. It wasn't dramatic. No sirens. Just her voice telling me, "You did the right thing getting out." When I got home, my mom was still gone. I locked every door, turned on all the lights, and sat on the couch with my arms wrapped around my knees. I didn't even take off my shoes. Just stared at the wall, trying to stop the loop in my head. The camera, the sticky note, the photo of me outside Walgreens. I wasn't imagining it. Later that evening, around 9:01, 2 officers showed up at the house. I showed them the Craigslist messages on my phone, gave them the address. They asked if I still had the link to the car listing, but it was already gone. Deleted. They said they'd head over to check it out. "You were smart," one of them said. "Very smart." I barely slept that night. Every creak in the walls sounded like someone stepping on the porch. The next morning, I got a call. It was one of the officers from the night before. His voice was polite but tight. "We went to the property," he said. "There was a man there. Matched your description. He claimed someone else came and bought the Civic in cash after you left. Said he'd never spoken to you. No photos, no title, no camera." I didn't say anything. My mouth felt dry. Craigslist account is deactivated. It's a dead end for now. He continued. Thing getting out when you did. But you did the right, I thanked him. Hung up. Sat in silence. That's when it hit me. He knew my name. Vanessa. I hadn't introduced myself until I got there, but he'd printed out photos of me. At work. At home. Who does that unless they've been watching? And worse, that camera. What was on it? Were there more photos of me? Had he followed other girls? How long had he been planning whatever this was? I didn't go to class that day. My professor let me zoom in and turn in assignments late. I texted my manager at Walgreens and said I needed a mental health break. She didn't push. I deleted Craigslist off my phone. My mom came home that night and I told her everything. All of it. Her face went pale. She kept saying, "You could have been hurt. You could have been taken." She cried. I did too. We stayed up and drank tea in the living room with every light on. The house didn't feel as safe as it used to. I thought about how I'd told Craig I'd be coming with someone. Maybe that's what stopped him from doing something more. Maybe he hesitated. Maybe that lie saved me. Later that week, a friend from our church texted me out of nowhere. She'd heard I needed a car, said her neighbor was selling one, a little blue Corolla, old but reliable. She connected us. He wasn't on Craigslist, wasn't trying to make money, just needed to let it go for cheap. We met in daylight outside a coffee shop. I brought my mom. The guy was in his 60s, wore a Colorado Rockies cap, and smiled like someone who'd never thought about taking advantage of anyone. We test drove the car. I paid $1,000 in cash. He handed over the title, notarized. That was it. The Corolla wasn't flashy, but when I turned the key and heard the engine hum, I almost cried. I didn't even realize how much weight I'd been carrying in my chest until it let go. Something about handing over money in broad daylight, with my mom beside me and a clean paper trail, made the world feel sane again. I started driving to my clinicals the next day. Every time I stopped at a red light, I'd catch myself glancing at the side mirrors, checking the rear view, scanning faces. It became a reflex. I didn't trust anything for a while. Not Craigslist, not smiling strangers, not even my own ability to tell when something was wrong. But part of me knew that wasn't a bad thing. What happened with the Civic hadn't just shaken me. It had recalibrated something inside me. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being aware. There's a difference, and now I knew where that line lived. I kept thinking about the camera, the do not touch label, the silence in that house, and those pictures. God, those pictures. He had to have followed me, taken those from a distance. He knew where I worked, where I lived, what I looked like walking down the driveway with groceries. I still wonder how long he'd been watching. Was it days? Weeks? And I kept coming back to one thought. What if I'd gone inside sooner? What if I hadn't seen the photos? What if I hadn't lied about bringing someone with me? I didn't want to spiral, but I had to be honest. I'd gotten lucky. I'd made good decisions, but luck had something to do with it too. Some girls don't get that chance to back out. By the end of July, life had mostly returned to normal. I got a new clinical assignment at a smaller care facility outside town, and I drove there every weekday in my blue Corolla. My mom worked fewer doubles, and on the weekends we sometimes went for drives in the mountains, just to get out of the house. One Sunday, I drove by that road again, the one where Craig M. lived, or claimed to live. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. The house looked quiet, empty. For sale sign staked in the lawn. Whether he lived there or used it as a setup, I'll never know. But it felt good to pass by without slowing down. Sometimes, when I'm scrolling through my camera roll or taking photos on my phone, I think about that disposable camera. What was on it? Who else might have been in those photos? Did he keep trophies? Was I the first? I'll never know. But I do know this. I trust my instincts now. I don't talk myself out of fear just because someone's polite. I don't agree to meet anyone I haven't vetted in a place I don't feel safe. I listen to the voice inside me when it says, "This feels off." And if someone makes me question my safety, even for a second, I leave. The world tells girls to be nice, to not overreact, to give people the benefit of the doubt. But sometimes, surviving means trusting the part of you that doesn't wait for proof. The part that doesn't care about being polite. Your safety is never worth someone else's comfort. It's okay to trust your gut, to say no, to walk away, even if it feels awkward or too dramatic. Intuition is an alarm built on things we notice before our minds catch up. It exists for a reason. You don't owe anyone your presence, your time, or your trust, especially if something feels wrong. Listen to that voice. It might save your life. I wasn't looking for much, just $50. Enough for gas and maybe a breakfast sandwich that didn't taste like regret. It was early November in Billings, Montana, and the cold had settled in like an unwanted house guest. I'd been couch surfing between friends' places since July, keeping my duffel bag in the trunk of my car, pretending like I wasn't living one bad day away from calling it quits. The death of my dad a year earlier had set everything in motion. One night I was pulling together a script for a short film for community college finals, and the next I was planning a funeral with my hands shaking over a thrift store suit. After that, I dropped out. Couldn't concentrate. Couldn't afford it. I started freelancing, writing, editing, whatever people needed, but it dried up faster than I expected. No savings, no backup plan, just Craigslist, a beat-up Honda, and the quiet kind of desperation that follows you around like body odor. That's how I found the job post. It was nothing special, just a short ad that read, "Need help putting up wall shelves. 1-hour job, $50 cash. Come by today." Simple, clean, no typos, which weirdly gave me a good feeling. It was posted by someone named Leland C. And the location was a small yellow house off King Avenue, near the old RV dealership. I knew the area. Quiet, suburban, a little run-down but not sketchy. I messaged, got a quick reply. "House is unlocked, I'm inside. Bring a drill if you have it, but not required." I didn't have a drill, but I had nothing else to do, and only $12 to my name. The math worked. I arrived around 2:20 p.m. The house was normal looking, which somehow made it worse. It had a clean porch, wind chimes gently ringing in the November breeze, and one of those ceramic squirrel statues on the steps. No car in the driveway, though. That struck me as odd. I knocked. "Doors open," a voice called from inside. That was my first red flag. But by then, I was already on the porch and too broke to turn back. The inside of the house smelled like vanilla air freshener and old newspaper. Not musty, but stale. Lived in, maybe. The living room had an arranged, almost staged look. Everything was placed just so. Throw pillows lined up like soldiers. Coasters perfectly spaced on the coffee table. "In here," the voice called again. It came from deeper inside. I passed a closed bathroom door and what looked like a storage room before finding the guest bedroom. That's where I saw him. Leland. Mid-50s, tall, sharp angles in his face like the bones were trying to escape. Faded button-up shirt tucked into slacks, suspenders like he was still stuck in a decade long gone. His eyes didn't blink enough, and he smiled with his mouth, but not his face. "You're Jonah, right?" "Yeah," I said. He handed me a screwdriver, pointed at a box of wall shelves. "Shelf up. Reorganizing this room. Was my nephew's. Won't take long. Just need one that was the second red flag, but I picked up the box anyway. I needed the cash." I set the shelf parts on the fold-out table and got to work. It wasn't complicated. One of those IKEA-type builds with dowels, cam screws, and vague diagrams that assume you're both handy and psychic. Leland stood just inside the doorway, hands clasped behind his back, watching. Just watching. "You, said this was your nephew's room?" I asked after a few minutes, trying to break the silence, trying not to look at him too long. He nodded once. "Yes, he passed. About 3 months ago." That stopped me cold. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. No response. I kept working, screwed the supports in. The screwdriver squeaked slightly against the pressed wood. I hated the way the silence settled back in around us. "Where do you want it mounted?" I asked once the shelf was assembled. He stepped forward slowly and pointed to the wall next to the twin bed. The sheets were rumpled like someone had just gotten out of them, but there were no pillows. The mattress looked sunken, like it hadn't been flipped in years. That's when I noticed them. Photos on the floor, leaned carefully against the wall. Dozens of them. I looked closer. My stomach dropped. They were photos of me. Walking out of the gas station near 24th Street, talking to my friend Rick outside a Walgreens, eating at that burrito place downtown, always from a distance, always unaware. I dropped the screwdriver. "What the hell is this?" Leland stepped to the side, not even startled. He crouched and picked up one of the frames. "He looked like you, my nephew. You wouldn't believe the resemblance. I saw you once and it helped. It felt like he wasn't gone." "You've been following me?" My voice cracked. "You took these?" He nodded again, slow. "I didn't mean anything harmful. You looked lost. Just like him. Lonely." I stood up fast. "Okay, I'm done. I'm leaving." But when I turned toward the hallway, Leland moved in front of me. Not fast, not threatening, just deliberate. "You don't have to go," he said. "Me. I cleaned this room for you. You could stay a while. It would help." My heartbeat was a hammer in my ears. "No," I said. "I gotta run. I have another job." I stepped around him, shoulder brushing his arm. He didn't stop me, didn't touch me. But he stood there, watching me walk down the hall like he was memorizing every movement. I didn't breathe until I was outside. I jogged to the car, hands shaking so bad I dropped the keys twice before I got the engine started. I drove a mile before pulling into a parking lot and letting myself shake. Then I deleted every gig app from my phone. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards in my friend's basement guest room made me flinch. I kept checking the narrow window near the ceiling, expecting to see Leland's face there. Watching. Of course I didn't. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had crossed a line. Gently, quietly. And now that the line was broken, it couldn't be repaired. You expect creeps on Craigslist, sketchy landlords, shady buyers. But this was something different. This was intentional, and worse, it was sad. Twisted, yes, but rooted in something human. He missed his nephew. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I say? The guy gave me a tool and $50 and stood too close while I worked. He had pictures of me, but no proof he took them. No assault, no threat, just the worst kind of emotional trespass, so I didn't report him. I just stopped applying to gigs. Found work instead cleaning offices overnight for a friend's family business. It was boring, but steady. Cash under the table. No clients, no surprises. Weeks passed. Then one night I was walking to my car in a strip mall parking lot when I saw it. A glint of light off glass. A reflection. A lens. I spun around. No one was there. Paranoia became my morning coffee. I started checking my mirrors more, avoiding the routes I usually took, switching up where I parked. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe it? And I didn't want the pity look. That quiet, he's not over 7 at face people wear when they think grief is just some hurdle you trip over once and move on. Sometimes I told myself I imagined it all. Maybe it was just a sad man in a messy house. Maybe the pictures were innocent, maybe grief makes people do strange things, but then I got the envelope. No return address, no postmark, just left inside my windshield wiper at the grocery store. Inside was one photo, me leaving a 7-Eleven, coffee in hand, tired expression on my face. On the back, in clean handwriting, "You looked better today." I nearly threw up. I moved in with my friend Rick that weekend, told him I needed a break from life. He didn't ask questions. We played video games and shared late-night fries and didn't talk about it, but I never went near King Avenue again. It's been over a year since I met Leland. Sometimes I wonder if he moved on, found someone else. Someone who reminded him of what he lost and didn't bolt after the first shelf. Other times I wonder if I'm still part of his world. If there's a room in that yellow house with new photos, updated ones. If he sits quietly, constructing a narrative out of my life. A life he was never meant to witness. Maybe he wasn't evil, just broken. But broken people can still break you if you let them too close. That's the part no one warns you about. People say grief makes you soft, but it can also make you reckless. I wasn't just desperate for money that day, I was numb. I wanted to feel useful. I wanted something to matter. But you can't fill someone else's ghost with your body, and you can't let someone rewrite you into a story that's not yours. Desperation makes us overlook red flags, and loneliness can twist grief into obsession. But boundaries, emotional, physical, and psychological, are what keep us safe. Trust your instincts. Walk away when something feels off. You are not obligated to play the role someone else casts for you. Before all of this, I used to tell myself I was just having a rough year. Then the year stretched into 2, then 3. By the time August rolled around, it had stopped being a phase and started to feel like the rest of my life. I was 31, jobless, and technically homeless, though I had a roof, thanks to a guy named Evan. Evan was a cousin of a friend and had agreed reluctantly to let me crash in his extra room for a few weeks max. That had been 3 months ago. Every creak of the floor made me feel like an intruder. I kept my backpack packed, ate small portions, made myself invisible by default. The meltdown at the cafe had been the final shove. I'd worked there since before the pandemic, pouring lattes and swallowing every passive-aggressive customer like it was part of the job description. Then one Tuesday, this woman complained about the temperature of her chai, and I snapped. Loudly, in front of a line of people. I wasn't proud of it, but it felt like something had cracked open in me, and once it did, there was no stuffing it back in. So I drifted, scrolled Craigslist like it was a lifeline. Most gigs were scams or creepy or barely paid enough to cover gas. But then I found it, this post that sounded almost gentle. It read, "Looking for part-time help, light cleaning, sorting through old boxes. My health isn't great. I mostly just need someone to talk to while I work on downsizing. $20 tea and snacks included. Walt." It was that last line that got me. Tea and snacks included. It sounded stupid, but I hadn't had someone make tea for me in over a year. I didn't need the money as much as I needed a place to be, somewhere without judgment or tension humming under the surface. I emailed Walt, and he replied within the hour. "Come by around 7. I'm in the South Hills. I live alone. Just bring yourself." I borrowed Evan's car and drove up. The house was tucked between tall trees on a quiet street, a modest 70s ranch style with overgrown hedges and chipped paint. Wind chimes hung near the porch, moving gently in the warm air. Walt answered the door with a smile that looked more real than most. He was in his 70s, white hair slicked back, wearing a cardigan like someone out of a black and white TV show. He looked like someone's grandfather, tidy, polite, fragile. "You must be Devin," he said. "You look tired." I laughed softly. "It's been a long week." "Well, come in. I've already made tea." The inside of the house smelled like cinnamon and cedar. It was warm, lined with wooden bookshelves and odd trinkets. The kind of house where time had stopped trying to keep up. The den was cozy, with 2 chairs, a small table, and a plate of butter cookies waiting beside the tea. That first night we just talked, and it felt okay. The first few visits were actually kind of beautiful in a quiet, soft focus way. Nothing dramatic happened. Walt never pushed. He just seemed genuinely glad I was there. We'd sip tea, sort through drawers full of keys or old letters, and talk about life. Sometimes his, sometimes mine. He told me about his late wife, Marie, how she used to make lemon bars from scratch and hated airplanes, how they met at a church picnic in 1973. His voice softened whenever he mentioned her name, like he was still remembering her hand in his. I told him things I hadn't even told my sister. About my dad's overdose when I was 19. About how I used to write music but hadn't touched my guitar in a year. About the cafe job and how everything had built up until it cracked. "You're not broken," Walt said once. "Weakness. You're just tired." People mistake exhaustion for that line stuck with me. Maybe it was the way he said it, or maybe I just wanted someone to believe I was still fixable. By the second week, I was coming over even on days he hadn't scheduled. Not for pay, just because the house felt still in a way that wasn't empty. He always had tea ready, sometimes cookies, sometimes banana bread. Always some drawer or box to go through. We never did anything invasive, just mild tasks. I dusted shelves, helped organize the closet, brought in groceries. Walt gave me $100 cash every Friday, folded into an envelope with my name on it in neat handwriting. It felt more like a kindness than a job. Then came the small shifts. He started texting me more. Things like, "Don't forget you matter," or "Looking forward to our talk today." Sweet on the surface, but soon he began suggesting I spend more time at the house. "You seem to exhale here," he'd say. "Like the world stopped squeezing you." I brushed it off. I mean, he wasn't wrong. The house was the one place I didn't feel like a burden. Then one Thursday I mentioned maybe applying to a job at a local bookstore. Walt frowned. "That would mean less time here, wouldn't it?" I laughed. Well, I can't live off tea and cookies forever. But Walt didn't laugh. He just looked at me like I'd said something cruel. The next day I found a new envelope in the den. Inside was $200 in cash. "You never ask for anything," Walt said. "That tells me you deserve more." I thanked him, but it felt different. Like he wasn't just being kind anymore. He was investing in me. And I started wondering what he thought he was buying. The moment I should have left came a week later. It was a Thursday, and I arrived late. I'd been helping Evan's cousin with a move and lost track of time. When I got to Walt's house, it was already dark. No lights on, no sound, but the front door was unlocked. I knocked softly. "Walt?" No answer. The air felt heavy. Still. I stepped inside and called again. "Walt?" I walked through the house slowly, something prickling at the back of my neck. It wasn't fear. It was alertness. That cold awareness that something wasn't right, even if nothing had happened yet. I found him in the den. He was sitting in the dark, hands resting on his knees, staring at the coffee table. There were 2 framed photographs in front of him. One was an old picture of Walt and his wife taken sometime in the 80s, smiling on a beach holding hands. The other was of me. I was laughing, head thrown back, standing on a street corner near downtown. It was a candid shot. One I never knew had been taken. I didn't say anything, just stared. "You remind me of someone," he said softly. "That's not a bad thing." I swallowed hard. My voice caught. "When did you take that?" He didn't answer, just looked at me with that same sad kindness I'd found so comforting at first. "You don't have to go back to people who never saw you, Devin. This can be your home." He gestured to the hallway. "Here, with me." I cleared the guest bed. "You could stay here, no rent, just be." I didn't respond. I backed up slowly, reached for my bag. My throat was tight. I forgot I have something. I need to go. He didn't block me, didn't shout, just sat there, watching. As I stepped out the front door, he said, "You don't have to be alone." But I didn't turn around. I blocked his number that night. I didn't explain, didn't answer the 3 texts he sent before I shut the whole thing down. One just said, "Are you okay?" Another, "Please come back." I told myself I didn't need to report anything. He hadn't touched me. He hadn't threatened me. He hadn't broken any laws. But that was the thing about it. None of it looked like danger. It was soft, careful, wrapped in warmth. I stopped sleeping for a few nights. Every time a floorboard creaked, I imagined him on the other side, waiting. I knew he wasn't, but it didn't matter. The idea had already made itself at home. Evan noticed something was off, but I told him I was just burned out. Eventually, I started working part-time at a bookstore. I stopped accepting any job offers from strangers, stopped opening emails that sounded too gentle. It took me months to understand what had really happened, that what felt like care had actually been control. That kindness, when used a certain way, becomes a leash. I still think about Walt sometimes. Not with hate, not even anger, just discomfort. He didn't hurt me, but he almost kept me. That's what scares me more. The slow erosion of boundaries disguised as generosity. The way someone can make you feel seen just enough to stay, just enough to make you want to belong to them. Walt didn't want a helper. He wanted a witness, a ghost of someone he lost. And I made the mistake of mistaking that for love. That's the thing about vulnerability. If someone offers you comfort when you're drowning, you don't always check where they're pulling you. You just grab the rope. And sometimes, that rope is a tether you don't see tightening until it's around your throat. True kindness respects your freedom. When generosity begins to ask for your loyalty, your time, or your identity in return, it's no longer kindness. It's control. Know the difference. Guard your boundaries. You are not a replacement, and you are not a project. I always hated February. Even before the diagnosis, even before I started waking up with that heavy dread I could never name, February just felt like a month for undoing. The snow gets dirty, the sky turns gray and never lets up, and time slows down until you forget which day is which. But that year, 2023, February hit different. It hit hard. I was 33 and quietly falling apart. 2 months earlier, I'd had a panic attack in the stockroom of the bookstore where I'd worked for 6 years. I remember the box cutter slipping from my hand, my knees buckling beside a pile of damaged returns, and my chest locking up like I'd swallowed the ceiling. My manager found me curled under the table next to a half-unpacked order of calendars. She didn't yell. She didn't scold. She just looked scared. And 2 days later, I got the email. We're placing you on temporary leave until you feel stable enough to return, which was code for, we don't know what to do with you. I told my sister it was voluntary. I lied because she already paid half my rent and looked at me like I might break the furniture just by sitting on it too hard. She didn't know about the bipolar diagnosis. I hadn't told anyone. I kept thinking if I just read the right self-help blog or fixed my sleep schedule, I'd bounce back like nothing happened. But nothing was bouncing. I was stagnant, quietly eroding. That's why the Craigslist ad caught my eye. I wasn't looking for work. I was scrolling for distraction. But there it was, titled like someone whispering, organizing help needed for small apartment, boxes, storage, sorting photos, cash. No demands, no urgency, just the kind of work that seemed soft and safe. Something I could do without breaking, something that didn't involve customers or fluorescent lights. I clicked on it. 2 afternoons, $100 per day. I'm home, just not very mobile these days. The name on the ad was Riley J. Something about it felt old-fashioned but gentle, like a pen pal, like someone who owned a typewriter and listened to the radio by choice. I don't know why, but I messaged him. I told him I was local, quiet, good with organizing. I hit send before I could second guess. He replied within minutes. Thank you. Please be on time. I get anxious when schedules change. That should have tipped me off. Something about it was too precise. But I ignored it. People with anxiety had to live somewhere too. He gave me an address not far from downtown Syracuse, just off a brick street lined with old elm trees and sagging porches. It was a cold Friday, February 17th, when I found myself walking up to his apartment building a little early. 3:40 p.m. I remember checking my phone before I knocked, but I never got the chance. The door opened before I touched it. Claire? His voice was soft. Riley looked like someone who taught French in the 80s, neatly dressed in a sweater vest, close-cut gray hair, eyes that didn't blink much. "Yes," I said. "Thanks for having me." "I like early people," he said, stepping aside. "It means you think ahead." The apartment was warm and smelled faintly like dried lavender and something sweet, maybe peaches. It was tidy, almost staged. Living room to the left, hallway straight ahead, everything stacked in symmetrical piles like a puzzle. "This is all memory work," Riley said, gesturing toward boxes, plastic bins, labeled envelopes. "Photos, letters, objects I kept too long. I need to sort it while I still can." "Of course," I said. "Where do I start?" He smiled like I passed a test. "Anywhere but the closet." I followed his glance toward the hallway. The closet door had a metal padlock latched across the middle, not a storage lock, not for privacy, for containment. I nodded and we got to work. The first hour passed quietly, like meditation. Riley gave instructions with calm precision. Stack these by color, organize those by decade, separate the torn photographs from the clean ones. I moved methodically, almost grateful for the order. My hands had something to do, and my mind, well, it stayed quiet for once. He gave me tea in a chipped blue cup. Black, unsweetened. Steam curled from the top in perfect spirals. I remember thinking how oddly elegant it all felt, like I'd wandered into the middle of someone's curated solitude. "You don't move like most people," he said, watching me stack photo albums. "Like you've practiced leaving rooms without sound. You're careful." I blinked. "Sorry, habit, I guess." "It's not a bad thing," he said. "They're stepping on." The world is full of people who stomp and don't even notice what there was a weight to that comment. Not hostile, but dense, like it had a shadow trailing behind it. He talked about his mother next, how he'd cared for her in that same apartment until she passed. He said it casually, sipping his tea, but his fingers trembled when he touched one of the letters from a box labeled Sorrow, 2008. "She hated forgetting things," he said. "So I became her memory. Every day I'd tell her who she was, what she'd survived, what she didn't need to be afraid of anymore." I nodded, unsure what to say. "I don't talk to many people," he added, "but you have a peaceful presence, like rain." It was a strange compliment, but I took it. I needed to feel useful to someone, anyone. At some point near 5 o'clock, he pointed to a large box sitting at the end of the hallway. "That one next, please," he said. "Just don't touch the closet. Ever. It's unstable." Unstable. I don't know why the word made my stomach knot. Still, I carried the box back into the living room, stealing only a short glance at the door beside it. The lock was rusted but solid, secured tight into the doorframe like someone had meant it to stay closed forever. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. When I left that evening, he handed me a folded envelope. Not invasive. That's rare. "I hope you'll come tomorrow. Your inside was exactly $100, all 20s. Crisp, uncreased." I thanked him, said I would return, and stepped into the cold February dusk, wondering why my heart felt strangely full and faintly afraid. I told myself it was just a gig. 2 days, easy money, no one to impress, no uniforms or customers or clanging phones. But by the second visit, I realized I was already too deep in the orbit of something I couldn't name. Riley was waiting at the door again. Same soft smile, same cardigan over a collared shirt like he'd been dressed that way for years. "You came back," he said, not hiding the relief. I said I would. "Most people lie," he replied simply. We worked through more boxes that afternoon. More faded letters with curled edges. More black and white photos where people stared like they knew their time was borrowed. Riley gave stories for each one. Some seemed rehearsed, others sounded made up. I didn't press, but he pressed me. "You live with your sister, don't you?" he asked. I looked up. Yeah. How'd you... You left your scarf here on the first day, he said calmly. You up. Syracuse isn't big. It had your name sewn inside. I looked. My fingers froze. The photo in my hand slipped and landed face down on the floor. Don't worry, he added. Understood. I only looked enough to understand you. People deserve to be right, I said slowly, masking the sudden pulse in my chest. You have an unusual necklace, he continued, polished. But you don't like things softened, do you? Jasper, right? Raw cut. Most people pick I didn't answer. I stood up to stretch, pretending the floor had made my legs ache. My eyes wandered to the hallway again. That damn closet. Do you ever open it? I asked casually. Riley's face changed. Not angry, not even defensive. Just cold. I said not to touch it, he said. There are things you can't unsort once you let them out. I let the silence hang there, heavy and tense. Then he smiled again as if someone had flipped a switch, pointing at the box labeled with the word. Let's get back to hope, he said. Later, while he stepped out to get the mail, I walked down the hall. My heart was pounding. My fingers hovered above the padlock. I didn't touch it, but I leaned close, and I heard it, a shuffle. Too slow to be falling cardboard, too rhythmic for pipes. It was the kind of sound a person makes when trying not to make one. Breathing. I backed away, fast, nearly bumping into the hallway table. When Riley returned, he looked at me for a long moment. You've been very respectful, he said. Not many people know how to follow instructions. That time, the envelope he gave me held $200. I didn't argue. I just left. And I didn't go back. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my side in my sister's guest room, watching headlights brush against the ceiling like passing ghosts. Every creak in the house made me think of the sound behind that closet door. Slow, deliberate, human. But what really stayed with me was Riley's voice. Not many people know how to follow instructions. He didn't say it like a compliment, he said it like a test. The next morning I stared at my phone. His text was already there. Would love one more day, $300 cash. I'll provide dinner. You calm the air. I didn't respond, but I also didn't block him. All day I told myself I wouldn't go, and yet by mid-afternoon I was standing at my closet, picking out the same jeans, same sweater. Something in me was curious. Something in me, something I don't like admitting, wanted to be chosen, not for love, not even for friendship, just for something. Before I could stop myself, I was on the bus. 2 stops later, I was walking up the same cracked sidewalk, past the same broken mailbox toward Riley's door. It opened before I knocked. This time Riley looked different, less tidy. There was a tremor in his hands, a nervous rhythm in his blink. I didn't think you'd come, he said. I wasn't sure either. He stepped aside. I made lentil soup, thought it'd feel grounding. I followed him inside. The apartment was the same, but it felt different. Dimmer, warmer, maybe too warm. I noticed the thermostat had been cranked to 80. We sat. We ate. We didn't talk much. Afterward, I helped him carry a few more boxes into the den. His eyes followed me everywhere now, like he was trying to memorize me the way he had everything else in the room. Finally, I asked the question that had been coiling in my chest since day one. Who did you keep alive? Riley's face tightened. His mouth twitched as if deciding between smiling or screaming. He reached under the table and pulled out a photo. Black and white. A girl, maybe 10 or 11, with sharp eyes and a small, cautious smile. My sister, he said. She was the only one who saw me. The only one who listened. He tapped the photo. Leaks. People say grief ends. It doesn't. It finds storage. And sometimes it... He looked up. She was. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. She died in that closet. Flu complications. Parents didn't even notice how sick. I tried to keep her safe. I tried to keep her remembered. Is that why... The lock? Riley nodded slowly. To forget? Some things don't want to be forgotten, and some people don't know how I stood up. My hands were shaking. I should go. He didn't argue. He walked me to the door, gently handed me the last envelope. His voice was soft. You've been more than I expected, Claire. People don't usually follow rules that weren't made for them. Then he added, I walked out. Don't feel bad if you think about it later. Everyone does. And this time, I didn't look back. 2 weeks passed. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't tell anyone. What could I even say? That I helped an aging man organize his grief into plastic tubs while someone, shifted behind a closet door that never opened? I kept checking Craigslist, though. Not intentionally, just casually. And then one day I saw it. Same format, same phrasing. Quiet help needed. Must be calm. Cash paid daily. No questions. Different name. Same zip code. I stared at the ad for 10 full minutes. I reported it. Anonymous click. No follow-up. No confirmation. But it felt like something I could do. A line in the sand. Since then, I've tried to forget. But sometimes, walking past utility closets or hotel maintenance doors or basements with padlocks, I feel that familiar squeeze in my gut. That strange mix of empathy and unease. I think about Riley, about how polite he was, how gentle, and how dangerous that can be when someone wraps their control in kindness. The worst part is, I still don't know what I heard, what I almost saw, what was behind that door. But maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the real horror isn't what's locked away. Maybe it's that we live among people like Riley, and we never know how close we are to being folded into their private rituals. Just another box labeled hope or regret, filed neatly away in case they need to remember we ever existed. Kindness is not always goodness. Some people don't need to raise their voices to hold power over you. They just need you to be vulnerable, to need the money, to crave a sense of peace or validation. And once you've accepted the tea, the compliments, the carefully folded cash, once you've followed the rules they never had to say out loud, it can be hard to see the exit for what it is. You're not impolite for trusting your instincts. You're not unkind for leaving quietly. And you are never, ever wrong to question a locked door. Rock bottom wasn't some dramatic crash for me. It was more like a quiet slide. One missed payment turned into 3. One roommate moved out. The other 2 stopped talking to me unless I owed them something. And then came the eviction notice. No yelling. Just a folded paper on the counter one Thursday morning with a date circled in red. I didn't even have it in me to argue. I lived in my Honda Fit after that. Parked behind a Planet Fitness because the staff didn't ask questions. I'd go in, shower, nod at the regulars like I belonged, then spend the rest of the day hopping between coffee shops and libraries, pretending I was working remote. The truth was, I was barely holding on to my freelance graphic design gigs. Half of them had ghosted me when I missed deadlines, the other half didn't pay on time anyway. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I just needed a win, a place to stay, even just a few months. I could get back on my feet. But every listing asked for references, credit checks, deposits, things I didn't have. Craigslist became my comfort scroll. Hundreds of places, none of them for people like me. And then I saw it. Private studio apartment, basement level, furnished, no credit check, safe, $400 a month, LGBTQ plus friendly, must appreciate quiet. It looked like a message from the universe. I didn't hesitate. I messaged them with a short note about needing something right away, said I was clean, quiet, could pay cash. They replied within the hour. Come see it tonight, 6 p.m., bring whatever you have. It's ready. That part, bring whatever you have, should have clued me in. But I was so used to being turned away I didn't question kindness when it showed up. The house was tucked at the edge of an old industrial area in Rochester. Trees without leaves, fences with rusted chains, the kind of neighborhood where streetlights hum but don't glow right. The siding on the house was faded gray, with a patch of grass too wild to mow. A man answered the door, tall, but not imposing. Round glasses, long gray cardigan, hair slicked back like an old-school teacher. "Isaac?" he asked, like he already knew the answer. "You look tired. Let's get you inside." I followed him around the side of the house to a door beneath the porch. Concrete steps led down into the basement unit. The air was cool and musty, but the space itself was cleaner than expected. Cot neatly made, small microwave, old fridge, heavy curtains over the lone window. "No lease," he said. "No noise. I work upstairs, so quiet is key." He introduced himself as Thomas. Just Thomas. I nodded and said, "I can be quiet." He smiled. "That's good. Quiet is peace." I didn't ask many questions. I was just grateful not to sleep in my car again. I told myself this was the first step back to normal. But I didn't know then that sometimes people offer shelter, not out of kindness, but because they like to keep things. And I was now one of them. The first night I slept harder than I had in weeks. The cot wasn't comfortable, but it didn't matter. It was warm, flat, safe. No buzzing streetlights, no early morning security guards knocking on my car window, just silence. When I woke, it was almost 11 a.m., and someone had placed a tray just inside the door. A note written in clean, slanted handwriting sat on top. "Breakfast. No need to cook. Less mess." It was 2 slices of banana bread, a hard-boiled egg, and a mug of something herbal. I didn't hear footsteps, didn't hear the door open. Just, it appeared. I ate it anyway. Hunger makes you dismiss a lot of things. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm. Thomas never came all the way inside. He'd knock, leave a tray, and disappear. He refilled the fridge with Tupperware meals and unlabeled bottles of milk or juice. I didn't see any store packaging, no receipts, no brands, just food, like it had always been there. I asked once if I should help pay for groceries, and he just waved his hand like I'd offended him. "Taking care of things brings me joy," he said from the doorway, not stepping in. There were rules, of course. No guests, no noise. Don't use the upstairs door, just the basement one. He said the top floor was where he worked. I like to keep my spaces separate. I didn't argue. I didn't want to lose the room. But by the end of the week, I started noticing things. The lock on my door was on the outside, thick, with an old metal slide latch that clinked when I closed the door too fast. I told myself it was for security. Maybe the last tenant had been reckless. Still, I tried calling a friend from my phone. No bars, nothing, not even one signal bubble. I rebooted. Same result. When I walked up the stairs to get outside, I found the outer door was sealed shut with a sliding bolt. It wasn't even locked in a normal way. It was latched like a gate. I jiggled it, hard. No give. A voice from upstairs called out, "Everything okay, Isaac?" I froze. "Yeah," I lied. "Just stretching." "Good. Don't wear yourself out." That night, I barely slept. The next morning, Thomas knocked and stepped inside, just a foot or two. It was the first time he crossed the threshold. He carried a tray with a sandwich and a cup of something lukewarm. "You haven't been eating as much," he said. "You feeling all right?" "Yeah, just been busy, working on a few client things." He nodded. "I don't hear typing much." That comment stuck to my ribs like glue. I hadn't used my laptop in 2 days. How would he know that? "I just use my tablet sometimes," I lied. Thomas didn't respond right away. He set the tray on the desk and stared at me. His eyes didn't blink often. I can tell when people are slipping, when they're about to break the rhythm. What rhythm? The one that keeps people stable, quiet, predictable. He stepped back out and closed the door softly this time. No latch. But I heard it click a minute later. I checked the fridge. A new bottle of milk. No label. I sniffed it. Nothing strange. Still, I poured it out. Something about it made my skin crawl. The window was screwed shut, I realized. Not just painted over. Actual steel screws drilled into the wooden frame. The curtain rod above it, nailed into the wall. That day I decided to leave. I wrote a note saying I was heading out for a walk, just a few hours, needed air. I placed it by the inside of the door. When I came back down the stairs later that evening, the bolt was drawn across the door. I knocked once, twice. Nothing. I knocked harder. Eventually, Thomas opened it. He held the note in his hand. "You left without asking," he said, voice low. "I wasn't sure you were coming back. I worried. I was just going for a walk. You didn't clear it with me." "Clear it?" My voice cracked. "I'm not your prisoner." He didn't get angry. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at me with that soft disappointment, the kind you see in teachers when you forget a homework assignment. "I just need you to follow the routine. It's for your safety, Isaac." That night, the Wi-Fi cut out. I checked my settings. Nothing. Router name gone. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark. I wasn't in a rental. I was in something else, something slow, something designed to look like kindness until it wasn't. And now I had to figure out how to escape without making noise. Because noise wasn't allowed. I stopped eating the meals after that. Not out of protest, but out of fear. Each container in the fridge now felt suspicious. Every neatly wrapped sandwich, every cup of soup. The meals were too consistent, too quiet. It was like someone had memorized how much I should need and when. There were no missed deliveries, no odd days. Thomas never forgot. That, somehow, was the scariest part. On the third day without eating, I heard his footsteps on the stairs. Soft. Intentional. He knocked but didn't wait for an answer before opening the door. He set the tray on the floor and stood still, watching me from the doorway. "You look thinner," he said. I didn't respond. "You know, people sometimes lose perspective when they're isolated," he continued, almost, "but this place, it's good for people like us. Quiet, controlled, predictable. Doesn't that gently sound nice?" "No," I said. "I want to leave." Thomas tilted his head. "You always could. The door is right there. But you'd have to prove you can handle being out there again. Structure helps people heal." I looked toward the door behind him. It was bolted. "I'm not healing," I said. "I'm starving." Thomas's expression didn't change. "You're detoxing." "From what?" He smiled, and it chilled me. "From chaos." That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the cot in the dark, heart racing, body cold and jittery from lack of food. My mind was flipping through plans, none of them good. Then I remembered the wooden slats under the cot. I pulled them loose, working one into a dull wedge. It took hours. I broke a piece of wire from an old lamp in the corner and used it to tie the wedge in place along the bottom of the door. It wouldn't unlock the bolt, but it would stop it from latching all the way. I waited. When I heard Thomas's steps around midnight, probably to do one of his quiet tray drop-offs, I readied myself. The moment the bolt slid and the door nudged open, I lunged. He wasn't expecting it. I knocked the tray from his hands, shoved him back hard against the stairwell railing, and ran. The cold outside air felt like knives, but I didn't stop. I ran barefoot through overgrown yards, past cracked sidewalks and closed garages. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I found a construction site 2 blocks over. The workers were packing up, and I ran straight to them like a lunatic. They looked stunned when I collapsed in front of them, gasping, "Call the cops." And they did. The officers took my statement, but it felt like I was describing a dream. No chains, no weapons, just locked doors and over-attentive kindness. It sounded paranoid, soft, almost pathetic. When they visited the house, Thomas was calm. He welcomed them in, showed them the unit. Yes, the outer lock was in place. "For security," he said. Yes, the window was screwed shut. Old wood. I sealed it for weather. The fridge was stocked, the space was clean, no drugs, no physical abuse, no official complaint, no lease. They asked if I wanted to press charges. But charges for what? He'd fed me, housed me. There were no bruises, just bruised reality. I didn't go back for my stuff, the clothes, my laptop, even my tablet with years of client work, gone. He probably tossed them, or worse, kept them. I stayed a few nights at a shelter before getting into a shared house outside of town. It wasn't much, just a room in a converted building with 5 other guys trying to stay sober, sane, or both. But I liked the noise. I liked the mess. I checked Craigslist again, a few weeks later. Not because I needed to, just habit, that itch. And there it was. Quiet tenant wanted, private basement unit, no credit check, must value peace. Different name, different photo, same tone. I reported it anonymously. It might have helped. Probably not. Men like Thomas don't need force to trap people. They use politeness, stability, control disguised as kindness. Sometimes I still wake up at night in my new room and stare at the door, just to make sure the lock's on my side. And it is. Every time. Desperation makes people vulnerable to control that doesn't look like control. Sometimes kindness is used as a tool, not to help but to trap. Always ask why something feels too easy, and always make sure the lock isn't on the wrong side of the door. People assume rock bottom has to look dramatic. Cardboard signs, cold sidewalks, some moment of collapse. Mine was quieter. I was parked behind a fried chicken place on a rainy Monday in Toledo, eating cold fries off the passenger seat of my Honda Civic and refreshing Craigslist like it was a slot machine that might finally line up. 3 months earlier, I had a tech startup job, a solid apartment, and a fiancé who still looked me in the eyes. But the company folded overnight and she left 3 weeks later, said she couldn't carry both of us. Since then, I'd been delivering for 3 different apps, working nights and crashing during daylight. My old gaming console, a Nintendo Switch I bought after my first bonus, was the only thing I had that still felt like mine. I wasn't gaming much lately, but I missed it. Missed losing hours inside a game that didn't ask for rent money or a resume. So when I saw the listing that evening, I actually felt something stir in my chest. Brand new Nintendo Switch games, Zelda, Mario Kart, Resident Evil 4 Remake, sealed, $75 for all, or trade for AirPods. $75 for 3 top-tier titles. Even secondhand, they'd cost double that. But I had something Vin, the seller, wanted. AirPods Pro, still clean, barely used. A Christmas gift from my sister, who didn't know I'd sold the matching Apple Watch already. I texted the number. Still got the games? Reply came fast. Yep. Trade for AirPods? 6:10 p.m. Family Dollar lot on Airport HOBY. Don't be late. I hesitated. That time was weirdly specific. I replied, I'll stay in my car. Just wave when you get there. He said, cool. I'll be in a black Tahoe. License plate starts with D7G. No games. I'm chill. I wanted to believe him. Craigslist is weird, but not always dangerous. I convinced myself he just didn't want porch thieves or shipping scams. I mean, I'd been burned before. A $30 mechanical keyboard that never arrived. But this felt different. At 6:05 p.m., I pulled into the Family Dollar parking lot. Sun was dipping, store lights already dimming. Place was empty except for a couple cars by the dumpster and a shopping cart corral that looked like it hadn't been touched in weeks. At 6:12 p.m., 2 minutes late, but I was still there, a black Tahoe rolled in, engine still running, tinted windows. No wave. I gave a little nod anyway. 2 spots away, the window rolled halfway down. A guy maybe mid-30s looked out, mirrored sunglasses, strong jawline, hoodie zipped up to his throat. He motioned with his chin. I cracked my door. You Leo? He said. Yeah, I replied, stepping out cautiously. He raised a brow. No names, remember? You Vin? Right. That should have been a red flag. But I saw the brown paper bag sitting on his dashboard. My prize, right there. I held up the AirPods. He motioned again. Hop in, we'll do this quick. No offense, I said. But I'm good here. Just hand it over. He stared at me, unblinking. Then casually he grabbed the bag and extended it. I took it. It was featherlight, Too late. I opened it. 3 cases inside, all the right cover art. But the cases rattled when I shook them. I cracked open Zelda. Empty. "What the hell is this?" I asked, voice louder than I wanted it to be. "These are shells." He smirked. "Yeah, and your AirPods are about to be mine." That's when I felt a hand on my shoulder. Hard, rough. I spun too late. A second guy had crept up from the passenger side, grabbed me with both hands. I felt my body tense. I was stronger, but surprised. They ripped the AirPods from my grip. "You serious?" I shouted, kicking backward. I caught one of them in the shin. He cursed. I twisted free, ran full sprint to my car, heart hammering. "Hey!" someone yelled, but I didn't stop. I dove into my Civic, slammed the door, jammed the locks, threw it in reverse, nearly hit a cart. The Tahoe squealed off behind me, tires screeching, engine growling like a threat. I pulled around to the other side of the lot and parked. Just sat there, shaking, breathing like I'd run miles. Then I grabbed my phone, still on the seat, thank God, and called 911. That's when the weight of it hit me. They had planned it, all of it, and I had walked right in. The cop who showed up was young, looked barely older than me, but wore the uniform like he was trying to make up for it. He listened as I explained everything. I gave him the partial license plate, described the Tahoe, the 2 guys, the way they moved and talked. He nodded, scribbled notes, and kept checking over his shoulder. When I handed him the bag with the empty game cases, he flipped one open and frowned. "Just Dance 2018, he muttered. "This the only one with a cartridge?" "Yeah," I said, "and it doesn't even belong in there." He closed the case and put it back in the bag. "All right, here's the deal. We've had 3 other reports like this in the last 2 months. Same setup. Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, great deal, public location, ends with a quick grab." "So they're repeat offenders?" "Probably, but none of the victims were seriously hurt, and nothing technically qualifies as armed robbery. Without weapons or injuries, it's a gray zone." "But they cornered me," I said. "Took the AirPods." "Yeah, and you filed a report. That's good. It helps us build a case, but I'm not going to lie to you. Unless we catch them in the act or find the Tahoe with stolen property inside, it'll be hard to press charges." I nodded numbly. My hands were still trembling. The adrenaline had started to fade, and I just felt hollow. "Look," he added, "you're not the first person to fall for something like this. They're good. They know exactly how to play it. Public enough to seem safe, private enough to make a move. I'll file this, and we'll circulate the plate number, but next time—" "There won't be a next time," I said quietly. He gave a small nod and walked back to his cruiser. I sat there for another 10 minutes, just staring at my steering wheel, then drove home. Well, not home exactly. My apartment lease had run out 3 weeks earlier, and I'd been crashing on a buddy's couch, an old teammate from when I played semi-pro League of Legends. He had an Xbox and a tiny place above a dentist's office, and he was nice enough not to ask questions. When I walked in, he barely looked up from his game. "Everything good?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. "Just a bust." I didn't tell him about the almost robbery. I didn't want him to know how close I'd come to losing more than just AirPods. That night, I lay awake on the futon, staring at the ceiling, replaying the whole thing over and over. The way Vin had moved, the second guy sneaking around, my own stupid eagerness. I'd let my desperation blind me, again. But the worst part wasn't losing the AirPods or getting grabbed. It was realizing that I couldn't even trust deals anymore. Even that little thrill of getting something for cheap, it had turned toxic. The next morning, I woke up to a notification on my phone from a Craigslist alert I'd forgotten to turn off. I tapped it out of reflex. Nintendo Switch bundle, Zelda, Mario Kart, Resident Evil, $70, all new, sealed. I froze. It was the same wording, exact same. Even the listing photo, the brown paper bag with 3 cases, was identical. The only difference? A new seller name, and a new meetup location, a Sunoco station, 15 minutes north of where I'd been the night before. I stared at the post for a long time. Not because I was tempted, but because it confirmed everything. They were still at it, just changing names, shifting spots, fishing for the next person hungry enough to bite. I screenshotted it and emailed it to the officer who'd taken my report, then flagged the post. Not that it would matter. Craigslist moderation is a black hole. The following days blurred together. I tried to focus on deliveries, but my head wasn't in it. Every time I pulled into a parking lot, I scanned for black Tahoes. I avoided eye contact with anyone walking toward me. If someone tapped on my window at a red light, I jumped. Paranoia had settled in. Not fear exactly, just a constant, low-grade tension, like my system no longer believed in safe spaces. I confided in my sister over the phone that weekend. I hadn't told her much about my situation, but she picked up on the edge in my voice. "Leo," she said gently, "you've got to stop thinking like a hustler. You're not a teenager trying to flip sneakers. You're a grown man. You got burned. That happens. But stop letting it change the way you see the world." "I didn't get burned," I snapped. "I got played. That's different." She was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said, "but don't let that play become your story." I didn't know what she meant at the time, but those words stuck. Over the next week, I deleted all my marketplace apps, canceled the Craigslist alerts, wiped the cache on my browser so those tempting posts wouldn't float to the top. I even started keeping a note on my dashboard. If it seems too good to be true, it is. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the grip on my shoulder, the smirk on that guy's face, the shame burning under my skin as I slammed my car door. But I was still here, still in one piece, and that had to count for something. A couple weeks passed. I kept working deliveries, stayed off Craigslist, and avoided anything that looked like a shortcut or a steal. The sting of what happened hadn't completely faded, but the sharp edges had dulled. One afternoon, I stopped at a GameStop to kill time between dinner rushes. I browsed used titles out of habit. A part of me still wanted that version of the deal. 3 solid Switch games, cheap, clean, no drama. But standing there, holding a pre-owned cartridge in a plastic sleeve, I realized I didn't even care about the games anymore. What I really wanted was what the trade represented. Control, a win, a sense that I was still clever, still able to work the angles and come out on top. That illusion had been punched right out of me in that parking lot. The employee behind the counter asked if I needed help. I told him no and walked out. Later that night, while I waited on a curb outside a sushi place, I opened Reddit and started reading more about scam setups like mine. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of similar stories. People selling phones that didn't work, buying gift cards that were already drained, meeting in public spots and still getting robbed. What struck me wasn't the scams, it was the patterns. People always came into those trades needing something, badly. Cheap electronics, quick cash, a way out of debt. And the scammers knew how to smell that need like blood in the water. Desperation made people override every warning bell in their head. That was me. Even with the parking lot, the sunglasses, the weirdly rushed conversation, my brain wanted the deal to be real so badly, I ignored it all. I went home that night and started drafting a post. Title: Beware of Craigslist Game Bundle Scam. Toledo, Family Dollar Lot. I told the whole story, kept it clean, kept it factual. I included the plate number prefix, the car make, everything. Posted it to Craigslist under the community alert section and then cross-posted it to a couple local Reddit threads. I wasn't trying to be a hero. I just figured if someone had posted a warning before my meetup, maybe I would have listened. Maybe. I never heard back from the cop. Never got a case number update. And I never got my AirPods back. But about 2 months later, I got a DM from a stranger on Reddit. "Hey, just wanted to say thanks. I saw your Craigslist post. Was about to meet someone for a Switch trade. Same exact language. I Googled part of the ad and found your warning. Canceled the meetup. Didn't get scammed." I stared at the message for a while. Reread it. then replied with a simple, "Glad it helped." That night, I finally let myself sleep without the bat by the door. The next morning, I opened Craigslist, not to shop, but just to look. My post was gone, expired or flagged, but a new listing was up. Nintendo Switch games, brand new, $80, meet at mall parking lot, serious buyers only. I didn't click. Instead, I closed the tab, shut my laptop, and got ready for work. I had an early delivery for a nursing home on the east side. Big order, soup and mashed potatoes. The kind of tip that actually helped. As I walked down to my car, I checked the note on my dashboard. If it seems too good to be true, it is. I left it there. I didn't want to forget. When you're struggling, the promise of a perfect shortcut can feel like salvation. But desperation clouds judgment. The sharper the deal, the sharper the hook hiding inside it. In a world where people will exploit your hunger, your kindness, or your silence, the best defense isn't paranoia, it's patience. Learn to pause. Listen to the voice that says, "Wait." Because sometimes the hardest thing to admit is that safety doesn't come from getting the deal. It comes from walking away from it.